There is a bread that used to sit on every table from the monasteries of Burgundy to the longhouses of the Baltic. You will not find it in any grocery store. You will not see it on any cooking show. And yet, this bread fed entire civilizations for 1,000 years before the first white loaf was ever pulled from an industrial oven. Monks ate it. Vikings carried it on ships across the Baltic and beyond. Soldiers marched on it. Peasants in cold stone cottages fed their children on it through winters that would break most of us. And here is what nobody is telling you. This humble bread, made without white flour, without sugar, without a single processed ingredient, can contain up to 5 times more omega-3 per serving than a fillet of wild salmon. Before I tell you what it is, you need to understand where it came from. We have to go back, not hundreds of years, many centuries. Picture the Baltic coast around the year 950. Not the Baltic you see on maps today, the one with cargo ships and border crossings, the one before that. Small wooden longhouses built into hillsides, thatched roofs, smoke rising from iron hearths in the dark half of the year that lasted 4 months. In one of those longhouses, before the sun came up, someone was already moving. A grandmother, maybe. A young mother with calloused hands. The fire had been kept alive overnight under a mound of ashes. She pulled a stone bowl down from a shelf and reached into a wooden chest. From the chest she took rye flour, dark and grainy, ground that morning between 2 stones. Then she took a handful of something else. Small, flat, oil-smelling seeds that her grandmother had grown in a field behind the house. She mixed them into the dough with a little warm water, a pinch of salt, and a piece of the sourdough starter that had been alive in that household longer than her oldest son. She kneaded. She shaped a dense, heavy loaf. She pushed it into a clay oven already glowing with the morning's first fire. Across the sea, in a Benedictine monastery in the Rhineland, a different kitchen was doing the same thing. Monks were kneading the same rye flour, adding the same seeds, baking the same dense loaves for their brothers. The rule of St. Benedict required silence during meals. The monks chewed this bread for longer than most food required, because it was dense, because it was real, because it had been made by hand by their own brothers that morning. And the crop those seeds came from had been mandated by Charlemagne himself. Around the year 800, the emperor issued a document called the Capitulare de Villis, listing every crop that every royal estate in the Carolingian Empire was required to grow: wheat, barley, beans, dyer's woad, and flax, not just for linen, for linseed, the same seeds those monks were putting in their bread. Archaeologists have found the proof. At a Viking Age site called Tudnes on the Åland Islands, in what is now Finland, researchers excavated a house that had burned down sometime between the years 880 and 1020. In the ashes they found nearly 100,000 flax seeds pressed into charred lumps, pressed for oil, pressed for food. At the Viking trading town of Birka, about 18 miles, 30 kilometres, west of modern Stockholm, excavators pulled whole loaves of bread from graves. Loaves that still had flax seeds visible in the charred crumb, more than 1,000 years after the funeral. The seed was called lin in Old Norse, linum usitatissimum in Latin. The most useful plant, the botanists called it later, because nothing in a medieval household went further than this single crop. It clothed you, it oiled the wood of your house, it lit your lamps, and when you ground the seeds and baked them into bread, it kept you alive through a winter that, by modern standards, had no business being survived at all. That is flax. And the bread it made was not ordinary food. It was the bread of people who could not afford to be hungry tomorrow. The woman at the clay oven did not know the word omega-3. She did not know about fatty acids or lignans or prebiotic fiber. The monks in the Rhineland did not know about anti-inflammatory compounds, or cardiovascular disease, or glycemic index. But they knew from generations of watching that when their households ate this bread, their people were stronger. They recovered from illness faster. Their winters did not kill them the way winters killed villages in the valleys below. Modern science is only now beginning to understand why. When doctors today talk about omega-3 fatty acids, they point to salmon. And they are right too. A standard serving of wild Atlantic salmon, about 3.5 ounces, 100 grams, contains roughly 2.1 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. That is real. That is why your doctor tells you to eat fish twice a week. That is why omega-3 supplements fill an entire wall at the drugstore. Now look at flaxseed. A 3.5 ounce, 100 gram, serving of whole flaxseed contains 22.8 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. That is more than 10 times what you get from the same weight of salmon. And a dense traditional medieval loaf, heavy with ground flaxseed, the way those Viking loaves in Burgundy were, delivered between 4 and 6 times the omega-3 of salmon per serving, from one food, made from grain and seeds that grew in a monastery garden or a peasant's back field, costing almost nothing. Here is what is happening. The omega-3 in flaxseed is called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. Your body takes this ALA and converts part of it into the same long-chain omega-3s found in fish, EPA and DHA. The conversion rate is modest. The National Institutes of Health Office of Dietary Supplements puts it at around 5 to 10% for EPA and less than 1% for DHA. It will not replace fish entirely for people who need pure EPA and DHA, but the total omega-3 load this bread delivers is so large that even a modest conversion rate gives you more usable long-chain omega-3 than most people ever see in a week. And the rest of the ALA is still doing work, lowering inflammation, feeding the cells of your gut, protecting the membranes of your arteries. Flaxseed does not stop there. A single 3.5 ounce, 100 gram serving of this bread, depending on the ratio of seed to flour, delivers up to 10 grams of dietary fiber. It delivers a class of plant compounds called lignans, specifically a compound called secoisolaricyricinol diglucoside, which research published in Nutrition Journal has linked to reduced inflammation and improved cardiovascular markers. Flaxseed contains up to 800 times more of these lignans than any other common food in the Western diet. So if this bread was this nourishing, this simple, this rooted in the soil and the hands of the people who made it, why has nobody heard of it? Why did it disappear? The answer is simple, and honestly, it is heartbreaking. When industrialization crept into food production across the 1800s and into the early 1900s, everything changed. Bread became a commercial product, and commercial products need to be cheap, fast, and long-lasting on a shelf. Flaxseed contains oil, and oil inside a whole seed stays stable for months. But the moment that seed is cracked or ground, the oil starts to oxidize. Within days, it turns bitter. It will not sit on a grocery shelf for 6 weeks next to the twist-tied loaves of Wonder Bread. So the industry made a choice. Bread became white flour, water, yeast, sugar, and dough conditioners. Flaxseed was quietly pulled from the recipe, not because people stopped loving it, but because it could not survive the supply chain. Whole rye was replaced by bleached white flour that had most of its fiber and B vitamins stripped out in the milling. Stone-ground grain that went rancid in a week was replaced by processed flour that lasts a year. Real sourdough leavening that fermented for 18 hours was replaced by industrial yeast that finishes the job in 90 minutes. The same happened across every traditional food. honey replaced by refined sugar, cold-pressed oils replaced by seed oils stripped of flavour in industrial refineries, dense loaves heavy with grain and seed replaced by pillowy white bread that a toddler could eat with one hand. What we gained was convenience. What we lost was what made the food, the fibre, the minerals, the oils your brain is literally built from, the slow-release energy that carried peasants through a 12-hour workday without a snack, and the bread that fed monasteries and Viking longhouses and entire northern European civilizations for 1,000 years was quietly pushed aside, written out of cookbooks, forgotten in the rush toward white, soft, and cheap. For most people alive today, flaxseed is not even a food. It is a thing you buy as a supplement in a plastic tub at a vitamin store. Until now, because I want to give you the recipe. As close to the original as we can honestly make it today, adapted for ingredients you can find at any grocery store. This is the bread of the Benedictine monasteries. This is the bread the Vikings carried across the Baltic. This is the bread that sustained entire villages through winters that modern supply chains would collapse under. And you are going to make it in your own kitchen. You will need 5 ingredients. No more. No dough conditioners. No sugar. No fats pretending to be other fats. 5 ingredients: a bowl, a loaf pan, and an oven. The first is whole rye flour, 2 cups, which is about 9 ounces, 250 grams. Not the sifted, refined, light kind, the dark, grainy, slightly bitter kind that still smells like the field it came from. Most grocery stores carry it now. It is usually on the bottom shelf, and it is usually one of the cheapest flours on the aisle. That is exactly how it should be. Honest food has never been the most expensive thing on the shelf. The second is whole flaxseed, 2 full cups, which is about 11 ounces, 310 grams. Buy them whole, brown or golden, it does not matter. Whole flax seeds hold their omega-3 oils inside their shells for months without going rancid. You will grind about 2/3 of them just before mixing the dough. The rest you leave whole, because the visible seeds in the final crust are not a decoration. They are the signature of this bread going back 2,000 years. The third is your leaven. If you have a sourdough starter, use about half a cup, around 4 ounces, 115 grams of active bubbly starter. If you do not, use 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast dissolved in a 1/4 cup of warm water. The monks used the starter. The Vikings used the starter. That starter gave the bread 18 hours of slow fermentation that pre-digested the grain and made the nutrients easier for the body to absorb. If you can do the sourdough version, do it. The bread will reward you. The fourth is water. About 1.5 cups, which is 12 fluid ounces, 355 millilitres. Warm to the touch, the way bath water feels kind, not hot. Hot water kills the culture before it can do its work. The fifth is salt, 1.5 teaspoons. Find sea salt if you have it, table salt if you do not. The medieval version would have used coarse salt hauled up from an Austrian salt mine or dried from the North Sea. Yours is fine. Now begin. Grind 2/3 of the flax seeds in a coffee grinder or a blender until you have a coarse meal, not a fine powder. Pour the ground meal into a large bowl. Add the remaining whole flax seeds. Pour in the rye flour. Add the salt. Mix the dry ingredients slowly with your hand, not a spoon, your hand. Feel the grain shift. Feel the seeds catch between your fingers. This is the part the monks did first every morning before the sun came up. They learned to know the flour by touch before they ever added water. Now make a well in the centre. Pour in the starter or the dissolved yeast. Pour in the warm water. Mix with your hand, pulling the flour from the edges into the center, working until a thick, sticky, heavy dough forms. It will not look like white bread dough. It will not form a smooth ball. It will be dense, coarse, almost like wet sand packed together. That is correct. Do not panic. Scrape the dough into an oiled loaf pan about 9 inches by 5 inches, 23 by 13 centimeters. Smooth the top with a wet hand. Sprinkle a few more whole flax seeds across the surface, the way a baker in a Viking village would have done 1,000 years ago for her family. Cover the pan with a clean cloth. Walk away. If you used sourdough, walk away for 12 to 18 hours. If you used yeast, walk away for 2 to 3 hours. During that time, something is happening that the monks saw as almost sacred. Invisible yeasts are feeding on the flour, breaking the grain apart, releasing the nutrients, building the structure of the loaf. They called it the breath of the bread. We call it fermentation. They were closer to the truth than we are. When the dough has risen by about half, preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, 220 degrees Celsius. Slide the pan onto the middle rack. Bake for 50 to 60 minutes. The crust will turn dark, almost black in places. The kitchen will fill with a smell that is earth and smoke and something older than your grandmother. Pull it out. Tap the bottom of the loaf. It should sound hollow, like a small drum. Let it cool for at least 30 minutes before you cut it. This is the final patience the bread asks of you. It needs the time to finish setting the crumb from the inside. Honor it. This will not be the bread you grew up eating. It will be dense. It will be heavy. A single thick slice will fill you for hours because, unlike the soft modern loaf, this bread is actually food. You may not love it on the first bite. Give it 3. By the 3rd bite, you will understand why entire civilizations built their lives around it. We live in a world that spends billions of dollars chasing the next miracle food, the next supplement, the next bottle at the pharmacy counter. We buy fish oil capsules. We buy Omega-3 gummies. We buy salmon flown in from Norway on a refrigerated plane. And all along, the answer was sitting in a seed that has been growing in the fields of Europe since before recorded history. If something clicked today, if these stories feel a little more real, a little more alive, do not keep it to yourself. Share this with someone at your table, a friend, a family member, someone who needs to be reminded that the old ways still have something to teach us. And if you want to keep walking through the medieval world with me, through the kitchens and the fields and the forgotten corners most people pass right by, subscribe to Medieval Way and hit the bell. Every week we dig up what they buried,